The 911 operator's voice crackled through my phone speaker as I sat in my car, watching the flashing red and blue lights dance across the windows of what used to be our home. "Ma'am, can you repeat that? You're saying 2 people are stuck together?" I took a long sip of my iced coffee, the expensive kind from that boutique cafe downtown that Marcus always said was a waste of money. It tasted like victory. "That's correct," I said, keeping my voice steady. "My husband and his secretary, they appear to be in quite a predicament. You might want to send the fire department and maybe some industrial solvent." What happened next would become local legend, the story that got whispered at PTA meetings, laughed about at dinner parties, and eventually landed me here, telling you everything from the very beginning. My name is Elena Vasquez Mitchell, and this is the story of how I discovered my husband's affair, planned the most elaborate revenge of my life, and accidentally became the most talked about woman in Riverside County. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to where it all started. Marcus and I met at a charity gala 7 years ago. I was 28, working as an interior designer for high-end clients, wearing a borrowed dress and pretending I belonged among the champagne-sipping elite. He was 32, impossibly handsome in his tailored suit, with the kind of confidence that made you feel like you were the only person in the room when he looked at you. "You don't belong here either, do you?" he'd whispered, sidling up beside me at the bar. I'd nearly choked on my drink. "Excuse me?" "The way you're holding that champagne glass, like you're afraid you'll break it." He'd smiled then, that devastating smile that would later appear in our wedding photos, in the pictures on our mantle, in the memories I desperately try to burn. "Don't worry, neither do I. I'm just really good at pretending." That was Marcus, a master of pretending. We got married 18 months later in a small ceremony at his family's vineyard. His mother cried. My father walked me down the aisle with tears streaming down his weathered face. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, I'd later realize. For 5 years, I believed I was living a fairy tale. Marcus worked his way up at the investment firm, eventually becoming a senior partner. I grew my design business until I had a waiting list of clients and a small team of assistants. We bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, the kind with a wraparound porch and a backyard perfect for the children we talked about having someday. But here's the thing about fairy tales. Someone ends up in the dark forest running from wolves. I just didn't know I was already in the forest, and the wolf was sleeping right beside me. The first sign came 3 months before everything fell apart. Marcus started working late, not just occasionally, every night. He'd come home at 10, sometimes 11, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. When I'd ask about his day, he'd give vague answers about big deals and demanding clients. "You wouldn't understand, Elena," he'd say, kissing my forehead dismissively. "It's complicated finance stuff." I'd been married to this man for 5 years. I knew he was lying, but I did what so many women do. I convinced myself I was being paranoid, crazy, jealous. The second sign came when he started password protecting his phone. "It's for security," he explained when I noticed. "The firm requires it now, client confidentiality." "Since when can't I use your phone to order pizza?" I'd asked, trying to keep my tone light. He looked at me with something cold in his eyes, something I'd never seen before. "Since now." The third sign, the one that should have been a neon board screaming, "Your husband is cheating," was the new underwear. I did our laundry. I'd done it for 5 years. Marcus wore practical boxer briefs, navy blue or black, bought in bulk from Costco. So imagine my confusion when I started finding silk boxer shorts in the hamper. Designer brands, red, leopard print. They were on sale, he'd shrugged when I asked, thought I'd try something different. Different. Right. But the final straw, the one that snapped my denial in half, came on a random Tuesday in April. I'd finished a client meeting early and decided to surprise Marcus at the office with lunch, his favorite pastrami on rye from that deli he loved. I was feeling good, determined to reconnect with my husband, to fix whatever had been fracturing between us. I never made it to his office. I was walking through the lobby of his building. I did our laundry. I'd done it for 5 years. Marcus wore practical boxer briefs, navy blue or black, bought in bulk from Costco. So imagine my confusion when I started finding silk boxer shorts in the hamper. Designer brands, red, leopard print. They were on sale, he'd shrugged when I asked, thought I'd try something different. Different, right. But the final straw, the one that snapped my denial in half, came on a random Tuesday in April. I'd finished a client meeting early and decided to surprise Marcus at the office with lunch, his favorite pastrami on rye from that deli he loved. I was feeling good, determined to reconnect with my husband, to fix whatever had been fracturing between us. I never made it to his office. I was walking through the lobby of his building when I saw them through the glass walls of the conference room, Marcus and a woman I recognized as his new secretary, Brittany. She was young, couldn't have been more than 24, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of body that made me suddenly, painfully aware of every pound I'd gained since our wedding. They weren't doing anything explicitly inappropriate, but the way he was leaning toward her, the way his hand rested on her lower back, the way she laughed at something he said with her head thrown back, I knew. In that moment, standing in that lobby with a paper bag of pastrami on rye growing cold in my hands, I knew my marriage was a lie. I didn't confront him that night. Or the next. I needed proof, not for a divorce lawyer, though that would come later, but for myself. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal ran. So I became a detective. While Marcus was at work, I went through everything. Bank statements he thought were hidden showed charges for hotel rooms, expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, and this one hurt, a jewelry purchase from Tiffany's. I'd never received anything from Tiffany's. But the real evidence came from his laptop. Marcus had always been careless with technology. He used the same password for everything. Our wedding anniversary, followed by his college jersey number. It took me 3 tries to guess it. What I found nearly broke me. Emails, hundreds of them. Love letters that should have been addressed to me, but were written to her. Messages that detailed their hotel rendezvous, their lunch breaks that lasted 3 hours, their plans for a future that didn't include me. I can't wait to leave her, one email read. Just need to wait until the bonus comes through. Then I'll file for divorce and we can be together. She has no idea, baby. She's so oblivious. Oblivious? He thought I was oblivious? I sat in our bedroom, the bed we'd shared for 5 years, and I sobbed, ugly, choking sobs that came from somewhere so deep I didn't know it existed. I mourned the man I thought I'd married. I mourned the future we'd planned. I mourned the children we'd talked about and the growing old together we'd promised. Then somewhere around 3 a.m., the tears stopped, and something else took their place. Rage. Pure, clarifying, white-hot rage. Marcus thought I was oblivious? Fine, I'd show him exactly how observant I could be. I spent 2 weeks planning. During the day, I was the perfect wife, smiling, cooking his dinners, asking about his work. At night, while he slept beside me, I plotted. Divorce wasn't enough. Leaving wasn't enough. I needed him to understand, in the most visceral way possible, that you don't destroy someone and walk away unscathed. My best friend Rachel was the only person I told. "You're going to do what?" she hissed over wine at her apartment. I explained the plan again. Her eyes went wide, then narrow, then wide again. "That's insane," she said. "That's absolutely insane." A pause. "I love it. What do you need from me?" "An alibi for Friday night and access to your cousin's costume shop." Done and done. The plan was simple in concept, complicated in execution. I needed 3 things: confirmation that Marcus was planning a business trip with Brittany, which I found in his email, a weekend getaway to a hotel downtown, access to their room, which I obtained by calling the hotel and pretending to be Marcus's assistant, and the key ingredient: industrial strength adhesive. Not just any glue, the kind used in construction, the kind that came with warning labels about skin contact and required acetone for removal, the kind that bonded in seconds and held for eternity. I bought it at 3 different hardware stores, paying cash, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was channeling too many crime shows. But if I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. The Thursday before their business trip, Marcus announced he had a conference out of town. "Just 2 nights," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Big client, you know how it is." "Of course, honey," I smiled sweetly. "I'll miss you." He kissed my cheek, the first time he'd touched me with any affection in weeks, and I resisted the urge to wipe it off immediately. "I'll miss you too," he lied. Friday evening, I told Marcus I was spending the night at Rachel's house. "A girls' night," I said. He practically shoved me out the door, barely containing his excitement. "Have fun, babe," he called as I drove away. Oh, I intended to. Rachel and I drove downtown, parking 2 blocks from the hotel. We waited until I saw Marcus's car pull into the valet lane, watched as Brittany emerged from the passenger seat, wearing a dress that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. "She's not even that pretty," Rachel said loyally. "She's 24, I replied flatly. "She doesn't have to be." We waited another hour. Then, dressed in the housekeeping uniform Rachel's cousin had provided, I walked into the hotel through the service entrance. Amazing how invisible you become when you're wearing a name tag and pushing a cleaning cart. I'd called earlier, pretending to be Marcus's secretary, confirming the reservation, Suite 1408. The concierge had been very helpful. My heart pounded as I rode the elevator. This was insane. Rachel was right, but I'd passed the point of rational decision-making somewhere around the 3rd email I'd read, the one where Marcus had described in explicit detail what he planned to do to Brittany on their anniversary trip. Our anniversary, as it turned out. Suite 1408. I knocked softly. No answer. They'd gone to dinner, just as I'd anticipated. The universal key card I'd lifted from an unattended housekeeping cart worked perfectly. The suite was beautiful. Champagne chilling in a bucket, rose petals scattered on the bed. My husband had arranged this, had put thought and effort and money into creating a romantic scene for another woman. I worked quickly. The bottle of lubricant was exactly where I expected it to be, nightstand drawer, right side. Marcus was nothing if unpredictable. I pulled on latex gloves, uncapped the bottle, and poured the contents down the bathroom sink. Then I refilled it with my special replacement. The industrial strength adhesive was the same color, the same consistency. Unless you knew what you were looking for, you'd never notice the difference. I took one last look around the room at the roses and champagne and betrayal, and I smiled. "Have a good night, Marcus," I whispered. "You've earned it." Then I slipped out, returned the uniform, and went to Rachel's apartment to wait. The call came at 11:47 p.m. I was 3 glasses of wine deep, beginning to wonder if the whole plan had been a stupid mistake, when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mrs. Mitchell?" The voice was strained, panicked. It took me a moment to recognize it. "Brittany!" "Speaking," I said calmly. There's There's been an accident. It's Marcus. We're at the hotel and, oh God, something's wrong. Something's really wrong. In the background, I could hear my husband screaming. What kind of accident? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the wild satisfaction spreading through my chest. Oh God, I don't know how to explain this. She was crying now. We're stuck, like literally stuck. I can't get away from him. The staff called 911, but I think you should come. I let the silence stretch out. Stuck, I repeated slowly. Stuck how exactly? I don't know. We were being intimate and suddenly everything fused together. The doctor on the phone said something about chemical adhesive, but I don't understand. I understood. Oh, how I understood. I see. Well, that does sound like quite the predicament. Mrs. Mitchell, please. I'll be there soon. I hung up and looked at Rachel, who was staring at me with her hand over her mouth. It worked, I said quietly. Oh my God, they're stuck together. Oh my God. I finished my wine in one long swallow. Want to come watch the fire department pull my husband and his mistress apart? Rachel grabbed her purse. I wouldn't miss it for the world. By the time we arrived, the scene was absolute chaos. 2 fire trucks, an ambulance, 3 police cars, a growing crowd of hotel guests in their bathrobes, smartphones out, recording everything. News vans were already pulling up, because of course they were. Ma'am, you can't go in there. A firefighter tried to stop me. I'm his wife, I said sweetly. His face went through about 6 different expressions before settling on profound pity. Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. May I? He stepped aside. The elevator ride to the 14th floor was surreal. 2 paramedics shared the space with me, carrying what looked like industrial solvents and very long gloves. One of them couldn't look me in the eye. The other, a woman about my age, gave me a small, knowing nod. Suite 1408's door was propped open. The scene inside would be burned into my memory forever. Not because it was traumatic, but because it was the single most satisfying thing I had ever witnessed. Marcus and Brittany were wrapped in hotel sheets, surrounded by firefighters, paramedics, and what appeared to be a very flustered hotel manager. Their bodies were pressed together at awkward angles, and every time one of them tried to move, the other screamed. Elena! Marcus spotted me in the doorway. His face was a mask of pain, humiliation, and terror. Elena, thank God. Tell them this isn't what it looks like. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Marcus, honey, it looks exactly what it is. You and your secretary stuck together in a hotel room after you told me you were at a conference. I tilted my head. Am I missing something? The adhesive. Something went wrong. I don't know how. Adhesive? I looked at the nearest firefighter. Industrial grade. Same stuff we use for construction bonds. Someone, he looked between Marcus and me, someone switched out their, personal lubricant with what appears to be construction glue. Oh my! I pressed a hand to my chest. How horrible! Who would do such a thing? Elena! Marcus's voice cracked. You couldn't have what, sweetheart? I was at Rachel's house all night, girls' night, wine and movies. I smiled. Ask anyone. Brittany was sobbing, not the pretty, delicate tears of a woman who'd stolen my husband, but ugly, gasping sobs of someone realizing that their fantasy romance had just become a very public nightmare. We need to begin extraction, one of the paramedics announced. This is going to require careful chemical dissolution, and it's going to be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Brittany shrieked. I'm attached to his, oh God! Ma'am, please try to remain calm. I watched for a while, watched as they applied solvents that made both of them scream, watched as they slowly, agonizingly slowly, began the process of separating two people who should never have been joined in the first place. At one point, a young police officer approached me. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're going to need to ask you some questions." "Of course, officer. I'm happy to cooperate." "Where were you this evening?" "At my friend Rachel's house, 247 Maple Drive. You can check with her and with her neighbors and with the pizza delivery boy who came at 8:30. He wrote this down. "Did you have any knowledge that your husband was planning to be here tonight?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Officer, my husband told me he was attending a financial services conference in Chicago. I had no idea he was in town at all." "I see, and you don't have any idea how—" "Elena!" Marcus screamed from across the room. "Stop lying! You did this! I know you did this!" I turned to look at him with an expression of pure, wounded confusion. "Marcus, honey, I don't understand what you're accusing me of. Are you really trying to blame me for your situation while you're literally glued to another woman?" The room went quiet. Every firefighter, every paramedic, every police officer turned to look at Marcus with barely disguised contempt. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. I looked at the officer and shrugged helplessly. "I'm sorry. He's clearly in shock. I should probably go. This is all very overwhelming." "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. We have your contact information if we need to follow up. Naturally, I want to help however I can." As I walked out, I paused at the doorway and looked back. Marcus was staring at me, and in that moment, through the pain and humiliation and anger, I saw something else. Recognition. He knew. He knew exactly what I'd done and exactly why. I smiled at him, the same sweet smile I'd given him for 5 years, and walked away. The story went viral by morning. #Gluegate was trending on Twitter. Local news picked it up, then national news. Someone at the hotel had leaked video of the firefighters carrying Marcus and Brittany out on a stretcher, still attached, still screaming, covered only by emergency blankets. My phone rang off the hook. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years called to offer their condolences while barely suppressing their laughter. My mother left 17 voicemails, alternating between concern for my well-being and requests for all the details, mija, every single detail. Marcus was hospitalized for 3 days. The chemical solvents had caused skin irritation, and the forced separation had resulted in tissue damage. I'd hear later that neither he nor Brittany would be in any condition for physical intimacy for quite some time. Poetic justice, I thought. The police investigated, of course, but there was no evidence. No witnesses, no fingerprints on the bottle, thanks to the latex gloves. The hotel's security footage showed a housekeeper entering the room, but the uniform and baseball cap made identification impossible. "We've hit a dead end," the detective told me over coffee 2 weeks later. "Without physical evidence or witness testimony, we can't proceed." "I understand," I said sympathetically. "It's such a strange case. Who would even think to do something like that?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. "Someone very clever. Someone very clever and very wronged." I said nothing. "Off the record, Mrs. Mitchell, between you and me." "Yes." He leaned back in his chair. "This is the most interesting case I've worked in 20 years, and I'm pretty sure I know who did it." He paused, "and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to find any evidence." "That must be frustrating for you." "Actually," he laughed, "not really. I saw those emails between your husband and his girlfriend, part of the investigation. saw what he wrote about you, what he planned to do. I kept my face neutral. He continued, I've got a wife at home, married 18 years. If anyone ever, he shook his head. Let's just say I understand why some cases go unsolved. He stood up, shook my hand. Good luck with the divorce, Mrs. Mitchell. Something tells me you're going to come out of this just fine. He was right. Marcus came to the house 1 month after the incident. He was using a cane. The forced separation had apparently been harder on him than on Brittany for obvious anatomical reasons. I let him in because I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't afraid of anything. You did it, he said without preamble. We both know you did. Do we? I poured myself a cup of tea. Would you like some? Don't play games with me, Elena. You destroyed my life. I set down the teapot and looked at him, really looked at him, at the man I'd loved for 7 years, planned a future with, believed in. And I felt nothing. No, Marcus, you destroyed your life. I just made sure you couldn't walk away from the wreckage. You're sick, you're twisted, I'm twisted? I laughed. You spent 18 months sleeping with your secretary. You were planning to divorce me right after your bonus came through so you could maximize your assets. You wrote emails calling me oblivious and boring and a placeholder until something better came along. I stepped closer. You don't get to be the victim here. We could have handled this like adults. Like adults? My voice rose. You lied to my face for 18 months. You brought another woman's perfume in our bed. You wore silk underwear for her and bought her jewelry while telling me we couldn't afford a nice dinner out. You were going to throw me away like trash. I was shaking now, all the anger I'd suppressed for weeks flooding back. I gave you everything, Marcus, my love, my trust, my future, and you were going to leave me with nothing. So you decided to humiliate me? I decided to hold you accountable, something your rich parents and expensive lawyers have never done. I picked up my tea again, hands steady now. The divorce papers should be arriving at your lawyer's office tomorrow. You can keep the car. I'm keeping the house. Like hell you are. I'm also keeping the evidence of your affair, the emails where you discuss hiding assets from me, and the financial records showing the thousands of dollars you spent on your mistress during our marriage. I smiled. I'm keeping this house, Marcus, and my lawyer agrees that I should probably keep a significant portion of your retirement fund, too, considering. His face went pale. You can fight it, I continued. Drag it out. Make it ugly. But I have those emails. I have all of them. And the media already loves this story. Imagine what they'll do when they find out the contents of your love letters to the woman you left your wife for. He was quiet for a long moment. You've changed, he finally said. No. I shook my head. I finally saw clearly. There's a difference. He left without another word. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I got the house, a generous settlement, and my freedom. Marcus got Brittany, for a while at least. Last I heard, she'd left him for someone younger, something about him being too intense and not over his ex. Funny how that works out. It's been a year now since that night in the hotel room. I've sold the house, too many memories, and bought a small cottage near the beach. My design business is thriving. It turns out being the glue woman makes you a minor celebrity in certain circles. I've had clients specifically request me because they liked my energy. Rachel thinks I should write a book. You'd be a hero to every woman who's ever been cheated on, she said over dinner last week. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to be a victim. Sometimes I think about what I did. Whether I went too far, whether there was a better way to handle the betrayal, the heartbreak, the rage. And every time I come back to the same conclusion. Probably. There were probably healthier ways to process my pain. Therapy, support groups, a nice, clean divorce. But here's the thing about being wronged. Sometimes the universe owes you a little satisfaction. Sometimes you need to know that the person who hurt you didn't get to walk away unscathed, whistling a happy tune off to their next conquest. Sometimes you need them to remember. Marcus will never forget what happened in that hotel room. Neither will Brittany. Every time they think about their affair, about the 18 months of lies and deception and betrayal, they'll also think about the firefighters, the screaming, the viral videos, the humiliation. They'll think about the consequences. And maybe, just maybe, they'll think twice before they do it to someone else. I was at a coffee shop last week when a young woman approached me. "Excuse me," she said nervously, Are you the woman from the news? The one with the glue?" I tensed, preparing for judgment. Instead, she sat down across from me, eyes wet with tears. "My husband's been cheating on me for 2 years. I just found out. I don't know what to do." I looked at her. Really looked at her, saw the same devastation I'd felt a year ago, the same shattered trust, the same broken heart. "What's your name?" I asked gently. "Maria." "Okay, Maria, here's what I want you to know." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You are going to survive this. It doesn't feel like it right now, but you will. And you have choices. You have more power than you think. But what do I do?" "That depends on who you want to be when this is over." I squeezed her hand. "Some women leave quietly. Some women fight in court. Some women," I smiled slightly, "some women get creative." "Did you really do it? The glue thing?" I leaned back in my chair. "The investigation was inconclusive. No evidence was ever found." She stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled. "Can I buy you a coffee? I have a lot of questions." I laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and genuine. "Maria, I think you and I are going to be good friends."